I smoothed down my graduation gown for the 100th time, watching my reflection in the hallway mirror while my mother fussed with the decorations in our backyard. This was supposed to be my moment. After 4 grueling years of business school, countless sleepless nights, and maintaining a perfect GPA, I'd finally made it. But something felt off. My name is Gabriella, and I should have known better than to trust my mother with planning my graduation celebration. "Sweetheart, come help me with these centerpieces." Mom's voice carried through the open French doors. I took a deep breath and stepped outside into the warm June afternoon. Our backyard had been transformed into something straight out of a wedding magazine. White chairs lined up in perfect rows, flowing fabric draped between trees, and crystal centerpieces catching the sunlight. "Mom, I thought we agreed on something casual," I said, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. She waved her hand dismissively. "Nonsense. This is a special occasion, and wait until you see what else I have planned." That should have been my first warning. The guests started arriving around 4. My younger sister Vanessa hugged me tight and whispered, "You look amazing, Gabs." Then came the flood of relatives, family friends, and former classmates. Even my ex-boyfriend Jarvis showed up, which wasn't entirely surprising since our families had been close for years. What was surprising was seeing him holding hands with my cousin Kylie. Franklin, our longtime family friend, approached me with a warm smile. "Congratulations, Gabriella. Your father would have been so proud." I swallowed hard at the mention of Dad. "Thank you, Franklin. That means a lot." The afternoon progressed with speeches and toasts. I was just about to cut the elaborate graduation cake when my mother clinked her glass and stood up. "Everyone, I have a very special announcement to make." Her voice rang out across the yard. My stomach dropped. While we're all gathered here to celebrate Gabriella's achievement, I have even more wonderful news to share. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched in slow-motion horror as my mother gestured for Kylie and Jarvis to join her at the front. "I am overjoyed to announce the engagement of our beloved Kylie to Jarvis. They'll be getting married this fall." The crowd erupted in cheers and congratulations. I stood frozen, the cake knife still in my hand, as my cousin, my own flesh and blood, beamed and showed off her engagement ring, the same ring Jarvis and I had looked at together just 6 months ago. "Isn't this wonderful?" my mother gushed, pulling me into an unwanted hug. "Now we have 2 reasons to celebrate." I pulled away, meeting Vanessa's concerned gaze across the yard. "Mom, how could you?" "What do you mean, dear? This is fantastic news." "You knew about them?" My voice cracked. "You knew they were together, and you let him come to my graduation celebration?" "Oh, don't be dramatic," she whispered harshly. "It's been months since you and Jarvis broke up. Besides, Kylie is much better suited for him. She understands the importance of family and tradition." The knife clattered onto the table. Through the blur of tears, I watched Kylie accepting hugs and showing off her ring, my ring, to our relatives. Jarvis couldn't even look me in the eye. "I need some air," I managed to say, turning away from the celebration that had morphed into my own personal nightmare. "Gabriella, don't you dare make a scene," my mother hissed, but I was already walking away. I found myself in Dad's old study, the only place in the house that remained unchanged since his passing. The leather chair still held his impression, and his collection of business books lined the walls. I ran my fingers along their spines, remembering how he used to say, "Success is the best revenge, baby girl." A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Vanessa slipped in, closing the door behind her. "They're all asking where you went," she said quietly. "Let them ask." I turned to face her, wiping away tears I hadn't realized were falling. "Did you know?" She shook her head. "I found out yesterday. Mom made me promise not to tell you." I laughed bitterly. "Of course she did." What are you going to do? Looking at Dad's desk, where his favorite quote still sat framed. The best revenge is massive success. I felt something shift inside me. The hurt was still there, but now it was crystallizing into something harder, something more purposeful. I'm going to give them exactly what they want, I said, my voice steady. I'll help plan their perfect wedding, and then I'm going to show them all exactly what the daughter they underestimated is capable of. Vanessa's eyes widened. Gabs. Don't worry, I smiled, and for the first time that day, it felt real. I'm not going to cause a scene or ruin anything. I'm just going to make sure that when the dust settles, everyone remembers whose celebration this really should have been. The Monday after my graduation disaster, I threw myself into work at the event planning agency where I'd been interning. Organizing other people's celebrations felt like cosmic irony, but at least it kept my mind occupied. You're here early, Mitchell said, leaning against my cubicle. As the CEO of our startup firm, he had a way of appearing when you least expected him. Everything okay? I looked up from my computer screen, where I'd been obsessively reviewing client portfolios. Just catching up on some work. At 7:30 a.m., he raised an eyebrow. Come on, let's grab coffee. 10 minutes later, we sat in the corner of the local cafe. Mitchell pushed a blueberry muffin toward me. You look like you haven't eaten today. Is this a coffee break or an intervention? I asked, but took the muffin anyway. Consider it a business meeting. He pulled out his tablet. I've been watching your work for the past year, Gabriella. You have something special, a way of turning events into experiences. I think you're ready for more responsibility. I nearly choked on my coffee. What kind of responsibility? How would you feel about heading up our new luxury events division? The offer hung in the air between us. It was exactly the kind of opportunity I'd been working toward, but the timing felt surreal. Before you answer, Mitchell continued, there's more. We're launching a new platform that combines event planning with digital marketing. I need someone who understands both worlds. My phone buzzed. A message from my mother. Family dinner tonight. No excuses. We need to discuss the wedding. I turned my phone face down. Tell me more about this platform. Mitchell's eyes lit up as he explained his vision. By the time we finished our coffee, my mind was racing with possibilities. Back at the office, Vanessa called. Mom's blowing up my phone about dinner tonight. Are you going? Do I have a choice? I sighed, watching Mitchell through the glass walls of his office as he gestured animatedly during a video call. Hey, Van, what would you say if I told you I might have found a way to turn this whole situation around? I'd say be careful. You know how Mom gets when things don't go according to her plan. That's exactly the point. I lowered my voice. She's always controlled everything, our lives, our choices, our celebrations. Maybe it's time someone showed her she can't control our success. Gabs. Vanessa hesitated. Just promise me you won't do anything crazy. Define crazy, I said, but we both knew I was already forming a plan. That evening, I arrived at my mother's house to find Kylie already there, wedding magazines spread across the dining table. She barely looked up when I walked in. Oh, good, you're here, Mom said, emerging from the kitchen. We need to discuss the wedding plans. I told Kylie you'd be happy to help, given your experience with event planning. I set my bag down carefully. Did you ask me first? Don't be difficult, Gabriella. This is about family. Family? I laughed. Is that what we're calling it? Kylie finally looked up. If you don't want to help? No, I'll help. I pulled out my laptop. In fact, I have some ideas already. The venue you're considering? I know the owner, and I have connections with the best vendors in the city. Mom's expression softened. See, I knew you'd come around. But, I added, I have conditions. I do this my way, professionally. This isn't just a favor, it's business. What does that mean? Kylie asked. It means I'll treat this like any other high-profile event. complete creative control, my team, my vendors. I met my mother's gaze. Unless you don't trust my capabilities? The challenge hung in the air. Mom's jaw tightened, but she nodded. Fine. But remember, this needs to be perfect. Trust me, I said, opening my laptop. It will be unforgettable. Later that night, I sat in my apartment, staring at Mitchell's proposal email. The luxury events division would be announced at a major industry conference, coincidentally scheduled for the same weekend as Kylie's wedding. My phone lit up with a text from Mitchell. Thought more about our conversation? The timing's perfect for a big launch. I smiled, thinking about Dad's words about success and revenge. With trembling fingers, I typed my response. I'm in, but I have an idea to make it even bigger. The pieces were falling into place. While my mother planned Kylie's perfect wedding, I would be planning something much bigger, my own redemption story. And this time, no one would be able to steal my spotlight. I closed my laptop and walked to the window, watching the city lights flicker below. For the first time since my graduation day, I felt truly powerful. Let them have their wedding. I was about to show them what real celebration looked like. The flowers have to be peonies, my mother insisted, hovering over my shoulder as I worked on the wedding plans. Pink peonies. Kylie's always dreamed of them. I didn't look up from my laptop. Peonies will be out of season. They'll cost 3 times as much and won't look fresh. Money isn't an issue. Of course it isn't, I muttered, thinking of all the times she'd complained about my college expenses. The doorbell rang, and Mom hurried to answer it. I heard Jarvis's voice in the hallway, and my stomach clenched. 3 weeks had passed since the graduation announcement, but seeing him still felt like a punch to the gut. Gabriella! He appeared in the doorway, Kylie attached to his arm. I didn't know you'd be here. Funny, considering I'm planning your wedding. I kept my voice professional, clinical. Actually, I need to discuss the budget with both of you. Kylie flopped onto the couch. Oh, don't worry about that. Aunt Angela's handling everything. That's not how this works. I closed my laptop. If I'm running this event, I need to meet with you both, properly, at my office. Your office? Mom scoffed. Surely we can discuss everything here. My office, tomorrow at 2 p.m. I stood up, gathering my things. This is business, remember? We do it professionally. Jarvis shifted uncomfortably. I have a meeting tomorrow. Reschedule it. I met his eyes for the first time. Unless this isn't a priority? The next day, I sat in one of our firm's conference rooms, watching Kylie and Jarvis through the glass walls as they waited in reception. Mitchell passed by, giving me a thumbs up. Show them what you've got, he whispered. I straightened my blazer and opened the door. Come in. Their footsteps faltered as they entered the sleek space. This wasn't my mother's living room. This was my territory. Nice office, Jarvis said, looking around. It's just a conference room. I gestured to the chairs. Let's begin. I pulled up my presentation, watching their faces as I outlined my vision for their wedding. Every detail was meticulously planned, every element carefully chosen to create something undeniably spectacular. This is amazing, Kylie admitted, leaning forward. But some of these ideas seem a bit modern, I suggested. Professional? That's the point. You wanted the best, right? Jarvis cleared his throat. The budget seems high. Quality costs money? I clicked to the next slide. But consider what you're getting. This won't just be a wedding. It'll be the event of the season. Press coverage, social media exposure, everything. Press coverage? Kylie's eyes widened. Mom didn't mention that. Because she doesn't know yet. I smiled. I have connections with several lifestyle magazines. They're always looking for unique wedding features. The bait was set. I could see Kylie practically salivating at the thought of magazine coverage. There's just one thing, I added, pulling out a contract. I need full creative control, no interference from anyone, including my mother. Jarvis frowned. I don't know if Angela will agree to that. Then I walk. I started gathering my papers. I'm sure you can find another planner who'll do whatever Mom says. Wait! Kylie grabbed the contract. We'll sign. Just make it perfect, okay? After they left, Mitchell appeared with 2 cups of coffee. That was impressive, almost scary. I accepted the coffee with a shaky hand. I learned from the best, my mother. Speaking of learning, he sat on the edge of my desk. How's the proposal coming for our launch? Almost ready. I've been thinking. I pulled up another presentation on my laptop. What if we didn't just announce the luxury division? What if we revealed a complete rebranding? New name, new direction, new everything. Mitchell's eyes sparkled. Keep talking. The wedding will have press coverage, right? What better way to showcase our new brand than with a high-profile event? We timed the announcement with the wedding weekend and steal their thunder completely, he finished, grinning. You're either brilliant or crazy. Maybe both. I showed him my initial designs. But imagine the impact. My phone buzzed. Mom again. Kylie says you're changing everything. Call me immediately. I ignored it, focusing on Mitchell's excited comments about the proposal. Let her worry. Let her try to control this. For once, I was 2 steps ahead. You know, Mitchell said, studying my face, revenge looks good on you. I thought about the contract in my desk, about the plans forming in my head, about the expression on my mother's face when she realized she couldn't stop what was coming. It's not revenge, I said, but we both knew I was lying. It's just business. The venue's confirmed, I announced, walking into Mitchell's office, and you'll never guess who else booked it for the same weekend. Mitchell looked up from his computer. Don't tell me. The International Business Innovation Summit. I couldn't hide my smile. Apparently, they're hosting their annual conference there. 300 of the most influential people in our industry, all under the same roof as Kylie's wedding. That's not a coincidence, is it? Let's just say I know the event coordinator. I perched on the edge of his desk. And I may have mentioned our rebranding announcement would make an excellent addition to their schedule. Mitchell leaned back, shaking his head in admiration. You're dangerous, you know that? I learned from the best. I handed him the venue contract. By the way, Mom's been calling nonstop about the flower arrangements. Apparently, pink peonies are now non-negotiable. Speaking of your mother, he hesitated. Are you sure about this? Once we announce the rebranding during the wedding weekend, there's no going back. Before I could answer, Vanessa burst into the office. Gabs, we have a problem. What's wrong? Jarvis is downstairs. He wants to talk to you. My stomach dropped. About what? He wouldn't say, but he looked serious. I found Jarvis pacing in the lobby, looking uncomfortable in his expensive suit. He stopped when he saw me. Can we talk? Privately? I led him to a small meeting room, aware of curious eyes following us. What's this about? The wedding plans. He ran a hand through his hair. Look, Gabriella, I know what you're doing. Planning an amazing wedding? That's literally my job. No, I mean... He lowered his voice. The press coverage, the venue choice, all of it. You're up to something. I met his gaze steadily. Funny how you still think you know me. I do know you. We dated for 2 years, remember? And then you started dating my cousin behind my back. I kept my voice level. So maybe you don't know me as well as you think. It wasn't like that. He sighed. Look, Kylie's excited about everything you're planning, but Angela's worried, and honestly, so am I. Why? Because for once you can't control the narrative? Because this feels like payback. I laughed, the sound sharp in the quiet room. Payback would be me telling everyone how you and Kylie got together while we were still dating. Payback would be revealing how you looked at engagement rings with me 3 weeks before you started seeing her. His face paled. Gabriella? But I'm not doing any of that. I stood up. I'm delivering exactly what you asked for, a perfect high-profile wedding. If that makes you uncomfortable, maybe you should ask yourself why. Back in my office, I found Mitchell and Vanessa deep in conversation. Everything okay? Vanessa asked. Perfect. I pulled up our presentation files. Mitchell, I need to show you something. I've been working on the rebranding announcement. Now? He glanced at his watch. Trust me. I clicked through to a new slide. What if we didn't just announce the company changes? What if we revealed a whole new venture? The screen showed sleek designs for a digital platform, one that would revolutionize how luxury events were planned and marketed. I've been developing this on the side, I explained. A way to combine high-end event planning with digital innovation, something that would put us light years ahead of the competition. Mitchell's eyes widened as he scrolled through the details. This is incredible. When did you have time to do all this? Let's just say I haven't been sleeping much lately. Vanessa touched my arm. Gabs, Mom called again. She wants to know why you won't return her messages about the flowers. Because every time I talk to her, she tries to take over. I turned back to Mitchell. What do you think? Are we ready to shake things up? He studied me for a moment. You really want to launch this at the wedding? Not at the wedding. During the wedding weekend, while everyone's focused on the perfect couple, we'll be announcing the future of luxury events. I pulled up another slide, and guess who's already expressed interest in being our first major client? The logo of a prestigious hotel chain filled the screen. How did you manage that? Mitchell asked. Remember that charity gala I organized last month? Their CEO was there. We got talking about digital innovation in the hospitality industry. I shrugged. Sometimes the best revenge is just being better at the game. Vanessa hugged me suddenly. Dad would be so proud. Yeah, I said, looking at the presentation that would change everything. I think he would be. Mitchell stood up, decision made. Let's do it. But Gabriella. He caught my eye. Make it spectacular. Oh, I smiled, thinking of my mother's face when she realized what was coming. I intend to. The florist backed out, Mom announced, bursting into my apartment unannounced. This is a disaster. I didn't look up from my laptop. No, they didn't. I switched vendors. Without consulting me? I found someone better, someone who can actually deliver fresh peonies in season. I closed my computer. How did you get in here? Vanessa gave me her spare key. Mom started pacing. Why aren't you taking this seriously? This wedding needs to be perfect. Like my graduation celebration was perfect? The words hung in the air between us. Mom stopped pacing, her expression softening slightly. Is that what this is about? Sweetheart, you need to move on. I have moved on. I stood up, gathering the wedding files spread across my coffee table. I'm treating this exactly like any other high-profile event. Professional, elegant, and perfectly executed. Then why won't you let me help? Because this isn't about you, Mom. Or have you forgotten whose wedding it actually is? The doorbell rang, saving us from further argument. I opened it to find Franklin, our family friend, standing there with a concerned look. I heard voices, he said. Bad time? Perfect timing, I replied, letting him in. Mom was just leaving. Actually, Franklin said, I came to talk to both of you. I ran into Jarvis at the club yesterday. Mom perked up. Oh, what did he say? He's worried. Franklin looked at me. Says you're planning something bigger than just a wedding. I laughed. Of course I am. I'm planning the social event of the season. Isn't that what everyone wanted? Gabriella, Franklin's voice was gentle. I knew your father for 30 years. You're exactly like him. Brilliant, determined, and sometimes too clever for your own good. Don't bring Robert into this, Mom snapped. Why not? I challenged. Dad taught me everything I know about business, about seizing opportunities, about turning setbacks into stepping stones. Your father would want peace in this family, Mom said. No, he'd want me to succeed, which is exactly what I'm doing. My phone buzzed. A message from Mitchell. Big news, come to the office ASAP. I have to go, I said, gathering my things. Work emergency. More important than wedding plans? Mom asked. Everything's under control. The new florist will contact you tomorrow, and yes, you'll get your precious peonies. At the office, I found Mitchell practically bouncing with excitement. The Innovation Summit confirmed it, he announced as soon as I walked in. They want you to give the keynote speech. Friday morning, main stage, right before the wedding ceremony. My heart skipped. They usually only invite industry veterans for keynotes. They've seen our proposal. They know what we're launching is revolutionary. He grinned. This is it, Gabriella, our moment. Does anyone else know? Just the core team, and… He hesitated. I may have leaked it to that lifestyle magazine that's covering the wedding. I sank into a chair. Mom's gonna lose it. Good thing you're not doing this for her approval. Later that evening, Vanessa came over with wine and takeout. Kylie's been texting me nonstop, she said, curling up on my couch. She's worried you're overshadowing her big day. I'm just doing my job. I poured more wine. Both jobs, actually. You know what's funny? Vanessa twirled her glass. Jarvis keeps asking about you, about what you're really planning. Let him worry. He mentioned that ring shopping trip, said he feels guilty. He should. I stood up, walking to the window. But this isn't about him anymore, or Kylie, or even Mom. Then what is it about? Before I could answer, my phone lit up with a text from the magazine editor. Love the angle for our feature. Rising star disrupts industry while planning cousin's dream wedding. Interview tomorrow? Vanessa read over my shoulder. Oh my God. Still think I'm being too harsh? I showed her the keynote speaker announcement. No, she said slowly. I think you're being exactly who Dad always knew you could be. She hugged me. Just promise me one thing. What? When everything goes down at the wedding, make sure I have a front row seat. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Deal. Looking out at the city lights, I thought about Dad's old saying about success being the best revenge. But this was more than revenge now. This was about showing everyone, Mom, Jarvis, Kylie, the whole world, exactly what I was capable of. And the best part? They'd never see it coming. The wedding rehearsal dinner was in full swing, but I was hiding in the venue's back office, reviewing my keynote speech one last time. Tomorrow would change everything. There you are, Mitchell's voice came from the doorway. Your mother's looking for you. When isn't she? I closed my laptop. How's it going out there? Kylie's crying because the rehearsal centerpieces aren't the exact shade of pink she wanted, and Jarvis looks like he's questioning all his life choices. He sat down beside me. So, business as usual. Perfect. I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Mom, 2 from the magazine editor, and 1 from the summit organizer. Mitchell pulled something from his jacket pocket. I got you something. For tomorrow. It was a small velvet box. Inside lay a delicate gold necklace with a single pearl pendant. Mitchell? It was my grandmother's, he said. She wore it when she opened her first business, said it gave her courage. He cleared his throat. I thought you might want to wear it for the keynote. Before I could respond, Vanessa burst in. Code Red, Mom's on the warpath. She found the magazine article. My stomach dropped. The feature wasn't supposed to release until tomorrow morning. Which one? I asked. All of them. They're all online now. Rising star disrupts industry. Innovation meets tradition. The wedding planner who changed the game. Vanessa was practically hyperventilating. They're calling you the next big thing in luxury events. Mitchell squeezed my hand. Showtime. I found Mom in the main hall, phone in hand, face flushed with anger. What is this? She thrust the phone at me, showing one of the articles. You're using Kylie's wedding for publicity? No, Mom, I'm doing my job. Both jobs. Both? What are you talking about? The keynote speech tomorrow? The business launch? Did you really think I was just planning weddings this whole time? Her face paled. What have you done? Created something amazing. I stood straighter. Something Dad would have been proud of. Don't you dare bring your father into this. This is Kylie's weekend. No, Mom. This is my weekend, too. And for once, you can't control the narrative. Jarvis appeared behind her. Everything okay? The guests are asking about the rehearsal dinner schedule. Show them, I told Mitchell, who pulled up the presentation on his tablet. They watched in silence as we walked them through our plans. The digital platform, the luxury division, the partnerships we'd secured. With each slide, Mom's expression shifted from anger to something else. Recognition? Respect? I couldn't tell. This is what you've been working on? Jarvis asked quietly. Among other things. I met his gaze. Surprised? Before he could answer, Kylie rushed over. The magazine people are here. They want photos of the rehearsal dinner. She stopped short, seeing our faces. What's going on? Nothing, Mom said quickly. Everything's fine. Actually, I smiled, everything's perfect. Shall we give them something to photograph? The rest of the evening passed in a blur of camera flashes and carefully orchestrated moments. I played my part perfectly. The supportive cousin, the brilliant event planner, the rising star. Every time Mom tried to intervene, I was one step ahead. Later, as the guests were leaving, Franklin pulled me aside. Your father used to say you'd outshine us all one day, he said. I don't think even he imagined this. Is that a compliment? He smiled. Just be careful, Gabriella. Success is sweet, but family? Family? I laughed softly. Family is supposed to support you, not sabotage you. Sometimes people surprise you. He nodded toward Mom, who was watching us from across the room. Sometimes they just need to be shown what they've been missing. Back in my office later that night, I found Mitchell waiting with 2 glasses of champagne. A toast, he said, handing me one. To tomorrow. To revenge. To success. He touched his glass to mine. Which, in your case, might be the same thing. I fingered the pearl necklace he'd given me. Thank you for everything. Just promise me one thing? His eyes met mine. When you bring the house down tomorrow, save a little spotlight for the rest of us. Deal. I looked at my keynote speech one last time, though something tells me there's going to be plenty of spotlight to go around. As I drove home, my phone lit up with a text from Vanessa. Mom's been crying, thinks she finally realizes what she's done. I thought about Mom's face when she saw the articles, about Jarvis's quiet surprise, about Kylie's oblivious excitement over the press coverage. Tomorrow, they'd all understand exactly what they'd underestimated. And I'd be ready, wearing Mitchell's grandmother's pearl, standing in the spotlight that should have been mine all along. Let them cry. Let them worry. Let them wonder what else I was capable of. Tomorrow couldn't come soon enough. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear. I stood at the podium in the hotel's main conference hall, adjusting my microphone as hundreds of industry leaders filed in. Mitchell's grandmother's pearl felt warm against my skin. 5 minutes, the summit coordinator whispered. My phone buzzed. Mom, where are you? Kylie needs help with her dress. I switched it off. The bride could wait. This moment was mine. Ladies and gentlemen, The coordinator announced, "Please welcome our keynote speaker, Gabriella Richards, CEO of the newly launched Luminous Events platform." The applause washed over me as I took center stage. In the front row, Mitchell gave me a subtle thumbs up. "3 years ago," I began, "I was told I didn't understand the importance of tradition, that I didn't know how to create meaningful celebrations." I paused, letting my gaze sweep the audience. "Today, I'm here to show you exactly what I understand about making moments matter." The lights dimmed as my presentation began. The platform demonstration was flawless, every feature, every innovation exactly as we'd planned. The audience leaned forward in their seats, phones recording, tablets taking notes. "This isn't just about planning events," I continued. "It's about revolutionizing how we experience life's biggest moments." Movement at the back of the hall caught my eye. Mom had slipped in, still in her mother of the bride preparation outfit. Her expression was unreadable. "And speaking of big moments," I smiled, "we're launching today with our first flagship event, a luxury wedding that perfectly demonstrates our platform's capabilities." The screens behind me filled with live feeds from Kylie's wedding preparations. The flowers, the decorations, the arriving guests, all captured in real time through our system. Gasps rippled through the audience. This wasn't just a presentation anymore, it was a live showcase of our technology. "As you can see," I gestured to the screens, "every detail is monitored, coordinated, and enhanced through our platform. From guest experiences to vendor management, we've created a seamless integration of traditional celebration and digital innovation." The questions came rapid fire after my presentation. Industry leaders crowded around, cards in hand, eager to discuss partnerships. In the chaos, Mom made her way to the stage. "Gabriella," she said quietly, "I had no idea." "That's the point, Mom. You never did. The wedding starts in an hour." "I know. Everything's ready. The platform is handling it all." She touched my arm. "Your father would have loved this." Before I could respond, Mitchell appeared with the magazine team. "Sorry to interrupt, but we need Gabriella for the official launch photos." The next hour was a whirlwind. Photos, interviews, contract discussions, all while monitoring the wedding preparations through my tablet. The platform worked perfectly, coordinating every detail just as I'd designed it to. I slipped into the wedding venue just as guests were being seated. Vanessa found me immediately. "You missed all the drama," she whispered. "Kylie's been freaking out because you weren't there, but everything's so perfect she can't actually complain." That was the plan. "And Mom?" She watched my keynote. Vanessa squeezed my hand. "I saw. She cried during your speech." The wedding music started. I took my place, watching as Kylie walked down the aisle. She was beautiful, I had to admit. The venue was stunning, the flowers perfect, every detail exactly as promised. But the whispers among the guests weren't about the bride. "Did you see the news? The platform launch. She's brilliant, going to change everything." Jarvis stood at the altar, but his eyes kept drifting to me. He knew. They all knew now. During the reception, Franklin approached my table. "Quite a day you've engineered." "Just doing my job." "Both jobs," he smiled. "You know, your mother showed me the magazine articles. All 6 of them. She's been collecting them." I watched Mom across the room, proudly showing something on her phone to other guests. My keynote speech, I realized. She was showing them my speech. Mitchell joined us, champagne in hand. "The investors are going crazy. We've already had 3 major offers." "Let them wait," I said. "Tonight, we celebrate." As if on cue, the platform notification system pinged. Every guest's phone lit up simultaneously with our official launch announcement. The room buzzed with excitement as people read about the revolutionary system that had created this very event. Kylie and Jarvis had their perfect wedding. But everyone was talking about something else entirely. I touched the pearl at my neck, thinking of Mitchell's grandmother and her courage, of Dad and his belief in me, of all the moments that had led to this one. To success, Mitchell whispered, clinking his glass against mine. To karma, I replied softly, watching my mother finally look at me with pride in her eyes. The Sunday morning after the wedding, I sat in Dad's old study, surrounded by newspaper clippings and magazine articles. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing since the launch. Investors, journalists, potential clients all wanting a piece of what we'd created. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Mom stood in the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee. Peace offering? She stepped in, placing 1 cup on Dad's desk. Thanks. I gathered the clippings, but she stopped me. Leave them. I want to see. She picked up the nearest article. Innovation meets tradition. How one woman revolutionized the event industry. He would have framed this one, right next to his favorite quote. I nodded toward the framed words on the wall. About success being the best revenge? She smiled sadly. I deserve that, you know. All of it. The public overshadowing, the silent treatment, the perfect revenge. It wasn't just revenge, Mom. I know. That's what makes it brilliant. She sat down. I spent so many years trying to control everything, make everything perfect. I couldn't see I was pushing away the most perfect thing I had. The doorbell rang before I could respond. Vanessa's voice carried up the stairs, followed by Mitchell's. Up here, Mom called. They appeared in the doorway, Mitchell carrying his tablet, Vanessa practically bouncing with excitement. You need to see this, Mitchell said, pulling up a video. The summit highlight reel just dropped. We watched as clips from my keynote played, interspersed with shots from the wedding. The final sequence showed me on stage, wearing Mitchell's grandmother's pearl, announcing our platform launch while the wedding unfolded seamlessly in the background. It's gone viral, Vanessa announced. Even Kylie shared it. Speaking of Kylie, Mom said, she called this morning. She and Jarvis are postponing their honeymoon. Why? Apparently, Jarvis has some business opportunities to discuss with you first. Mitchell laughed. Let me guess. He suddenly realizes his ex-girlfriend is a business genius and wants in. Too late, I said, showing them the contracts I'd signed that morning. We've already partnered with the top 3 event management firms in the country. And the international offers? Mitchell asked, being reviewed by our new legal team. Mom touched one of the magazine covers. I keep thinking about your graduation day, how I thought I was doing the right thing, pushing you toward what I thought was best. Mom, no, let me finish. I was wrong, so wrong. And watching you yesterday, seeing what you've built, what you've become. She wiped her eyes. I've never been more proud. Vanessa hugged her. Group hug moment? Actually, Mitchell cleared his throat. I have something else first. He pulled out a small box, similar to the one that had held the pearl necklace. I was going to wait, but inside was a key. The office next to mine, he explained. Well, technically, it's bigger than mine, fitting for the new CEO. CEO? Mom and Vanessa exclaimed simultaneously. Joint CEO, Mitchell corrected. We're partners now, officially. If you want it. I touched the pearl at my neck, thinking of his grandmother and her courage, of Dad and his belief in success, of all the moments that had led here. Partners, I agreed, taking the key. Well, Mom stood up, straightening her shoulders. This calls for celebration, a proper one this time. No pink peonies, I warned. No hijacking, she promised. Just family celebrating family. As they headed downstairs to plan, Mitchell lingered. You know, he said, when you first told me your revenge plan, I thought you were crazy. And now? Now I think you're brilliant and a little scary and… He stepped closer. Completely amazing. The kiss was soft, unexpected, and somehow perfectly timed. A throat cleared. Franklin stood in the doorway, grinning. Bad timing? Perfect timing, I said. We're celebrating. I know. Your mother's already called the caterers. He walked to Dad's desk, running his hand along the polished wood. Robert always said success wasn't about proving others wrong. It was about proving yourself right. I looked around the study, at the articles proving my success, at Mitchell who believed in me, at Dad's quote still guiding my way. Well, Mitchell held out his hand. Ready to go prove yourself right again? Downstairs, I could hear Mom and Vanessa laughing, making plans, being family, real family this time. No manipulation, no control, just love and support and pride. Actually, I smiled, taking his hand, I think I already have. The pearl at my neck caught the sunlight, throwing patterns on the wall next to Dad's quote. Success, revenge, love, family. In the end, they'd all merged into something better than I'd planned, something real, something mine. And this was just the beginning.
I'm Liz, and by some twist of fate, I'm married to the most amazing guy I've ever met, Alex. We're both 28, got our own place, pay our bills, and live a life that's ours. It's been a year since we said I do, and honestly, life's been good, except for one little thing: Alex's parents. Now, don't get me wrong, I never expected to be the daughter-in-law in shining armor, but I also didn't expect to be the family's unwanted guest. The day I met my in-laws, it felt like walking into a lion's den with a stake tied to my neck. My mother-in-law, Jane, had this way of looking at me, like she was trying to figure out if I was more of a nuisance or just plain boring. I could tell she had sized me up and found me lacking before I even had a chance to say hello. Alex had warned me about his mom. She can be a bit much, he said, as we drove to their place that first time. But don't take it to heart, okay? I didn't. Or at least I tried not to. At dinner, I was passing the salt when Jane said, "You know, Stephanie used to cook such wonderful meals. Remember that risotto, honey?" She said to Alex, who just nodded, his jaw tight. "Yeah, I remember," he replied, not looking at me. I sat there, salt shaker in hand, feeling like I was invisible. They all talked about Stephanie as if I wasn't there. I felt a pang in my chest, but I swallowed it down with a smile. "Sounds like she was a great cook," I said, trying to seem unaffected. Jane's eyes met mine, and she smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, she was. She was a lot of things." That night, I told Alex how I felt. It's like she's measuring me against some ghost. Alex hugged me close. "You're the one I chose, Liz. That's all that matters." I wanted to believe him, but as I'd learned, Jane had a long game in mind, and I was the pawn she was eager to sacrifice. I just didn't know it yet. Living with an allergy isn't just inconvenient, it's like having a shadow that's constantly whispering danger in your ear. Since I was a kid, peanuts have been my arch nemesis. It started with a spoonful of peanut paste and a trip to the emergency room that left my parents with a crystal clear message. Keep her away from peanuts and a whole host of other foods if you want her to grow up. It's not just peanuts, though. Soy, peas, cherries, almonds, tomatoes, apricots, bananas, and even potatoes, they're all off limits. It's a list that makes waiters raise an eyebrow and friends hesitate to invite me over for dinner. It's also a list that my mother-in-law, Jane, knows by heart, yet she somehow manages to question every single time we're over for dinner. "Are you sure you can't even have a little bit of this pie? It's got almond extract," she'd ask, with a tone that hovered between concern and disbelief. I would smile politely, though I'd rather not, and say, "Yeah, I'm sure. Thanks, though." It was the same dance every time. I remember once, at a family gathering, I was navigating the buffet, a mental checklist running through my head. Alex was by my side, plate in hand, trying to help me find something safe to eat. That's when Jane swooped in, her voice sickly sweet. "Liz, you must try this casserole. I made sure it was Liz-friendly," she announced, but the glint in her eye didn't match her nurturing words. Alex paused, his fork mid-air. "Mom, you used cream of mushroom soup in this, right?" he asked, knowing full well that many brands included soy, a big no-no for me. Jane's smile faltered for a second. "Oh, I think so. It should be fine." But it wasn't fine, and we both knew it. We made our excuses, me leaving the casserole untouched. But the incident stuck with me. It was a small victory in what felt like an ongoing battle, a battle where Jane held all the cards because she controlled the kitchen. I've learned to navigate this world with careful steps. Eating out is a strategic operation. Alex and I were at our favorite Italian place, a rare find that understood the gravity of food allergies. I'd recited my usual spiel to the waiter, who nodded understandingly. Alex watched me with those soft eyes of his, the ones that said he'd do anything to make my life easier. "You okay?" he asked after the waiter left. "Yeah, I'm fine. I just hate making a fuss," I replied, folding my napkin on my lap. "You're not making a fuss. You're making sure you don't, die," he said, half joking, half serious. I laughed, a short, grateful sound. Well, when you put it that way. After dinner, as we walked under the clear night sky, I felt light, happy. That's when my phone buzzed with a text from Jane. Her words were like a cloud over the moon, darkening the moment. "Be careful, Liz. Not everyone takes your condition seriously. Wouldn't want anything to happen to you." I read the text to Alex, who wrapped an arm around me, pulling me close. "She's just trying to get to you," he said. But as much as I wanted to shrug it off, I couldn't shake the feeling that Jane's message was more than just a jab. It was a warning, a reminder that my allergy made me vulnerable, not just to food, but to people like her, who saw it as a weakness to be exploited. The rest of the walk home, I couldn't help but think about all the close calls, all the accidental exposures, and how easily something could go wrong. It wasn't just the peanuts, or the soy, or the peas. It was the realization that my allergy was more than a personal battle. It was a chink in my armor that someone like Jane could see as an opportunity. And that thought was scarier than any allergic reaction I'd ever had. Dinners at Jane's house were always a production, like a play where everyone knew their parts except me. I was the wild card, the one who could unintentionally cause a scene with a single bite. Alex tried to make it better, but there's only so much you can do when you're playing in someone else's home court. One particular evening, the tension was as thick as the gravy on the table. Jane was bustling around, placing dish after dish on the table. I sat there, my own plate empty, waiting to figure out what I could eat without a trip to the hospital. "Alex, darling, pass the green beans to Liz. They're just divine," Jane said, her voice dripping with a sweetness that didn't reach her eyes. I eyed the beans, but something seemed off. "What's in them?" I asked. "Oh, just a touch of almond slivers for crunch," she said, waving a hand dismissively. I put my hand up, stopping Alex's reach. "I can't eat those, remember? Almonds are a no-go for me." Jane feigned surprise, a hand to her chest. "Oh dear, I must have forgotten. Silly me." Alex's chair scraped back as he stood up. "Mom, this is serious. Liz could end up in the hospital." His voice was firm, edged with a frustration that made Jane's eyes narrow just a little. "I just wanted to make something nice," she said. "It's not my fault Liz has all these allergies." The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. The other relatives glanced around, forks paused midair, not sure where to look. I felt a flush creeping up my neck, embarrassed by the spotlight. Alex's dad, Mark, tried to break the tension. "Let's just enjoy the meal, shall we? There's plenty Liz can eat." But the damage was done. The rest of the dinner passed in strained politeness, with Jane asking pointed questions about my allergies, as if she were taking notes for next time. Later, when Alex and I were alone, he apologized. "I'm sorry, Liz. I should have double-checked everything before we came." I shook my head, tired of feeling like a problem to be managed. "It's not your fault, but I'm starting to think your mom does these things on purpose." He didn't answer, and he didn't need to. We both knew the truth. Jane was serving up a side of malice with every meal, and I was the main course. I could always tell when Jane had been working on Alex. He'd get this distant look in his eyes, like he was seeing me, but also seeing through me, weighing her words against his own judgment. This particular evening, it was like a cloud had settled over him, and I knew it before he even said a word. Mom thinks we should consider. Well, she thinks we might not be thinking about the future enough, Alex muttered, not meeting my eye as he fumbled with the TV remote. The future? I asked, a sinking feeling in my gut. Yeah, kids and your health issues, he continued, the word issues hanging awkwardly in the air between us. I felt a tightness in my chest. She talked to you about my allergies again, didn't she? He sighed, setting the remote down. She's just worried, Liz. She thinks it's a lot for us to handle, especially if we want a family. I bristled. We've talked about this. I've managed so far, haven't I? And there are plenty of people with allergies who have kids. Alex ran a hand through his hair, a sure sign he was stressed. I know. It's just... She has this way of making me doubt things. The room was quiet for a moment, the tension thick. I watched him, this man I loved, wrestling with the seeds of doubt his mother had planted. Alex, do you doubt us? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. No. He looked up, finally, his eyes clear and firm. No, I don't. I just hate that she keeps bringing it up. I hate that it makes us fight. I reached for his hand, our fingers intertwining. We're not fighting. We're on the same side, remember? He nodded, pulling me into a hug. You and me against the world, right? Right, I said, but as I held him, I couldn't shake the feeling that Jane's words were like weeds, threatening to grow wild and choke the life out of the beautiful thing we had. And I knew then that it wasn't just my allergies that needed managing. It was the doubts that could seep into the cracks of even the strongest relationships. The news of my pregnancy came as a surprise, a happy one for Alex and me, a complicated one for everyone else. The day we announced it to his parents, Jane's reaction was like watching a robot trying to mimic human emotions. A pause, then a smile that didn't quite match the situation. We're going to have a baby, Mom, Alex said, his voice a mix of pride and caution as he gauged his mother's reaction. That's wonderful, Jane managed to say, the words sounding foreign in her mouth. We must have a family dinner to celebrate. I was skeptical. Celebrations at Jane's were never just celebrations, but I saw the hopeful look in Alex's eyes and agreed. The night of the dinner, the house was buzzing with relatives. Jane was the perfect hostess, floating from guest to guest with a grace that felt almost genuine. When she reached us, her smile was practiced. Congratulations, Liz, she said. This is such a joyous occasion. Thank you, Jane, I replied, trying to match her formality. We're excited. Alex wrapped his arm around my waist, a silent thank you for playing along. As dinner approached, I felt the familiar anxiety. A table full of food was a minefield for me, but tonight, I hoped, would be different. The table was a feast, dishes upon dishes laid out, and I felt every eye on me as I hesitated, my hand hovering over the options. Go on, dear, Jane urged. Eat up. You're eating for two now. I smiled weakly, choosing the safest options, vegetables and rice, plain and simple. But as I reached for a slice of bread, Jane stopped me. Actually, maybe not that one, she said quickly. I'm not sure if the baker used soy flour. I paused, bread in hand, and met her gaze. There was a flicker of something there. Concern, or was it a challenge? Thank you for letting me know, I said, putting the bread down. But the warning bells were already ringing in my head. How did she know about the soy flour? It seemed too close a call, too perfect a save. The rest of the meal passed in a blur, congratulations mingling with the clinking of glasses. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Jane's hospitality was a veneer, and beneath it lay a trap, set and waiting for just the right moment. The family dinner in honor of our future baby was nothing short of a banquet. Jane had outdone herself, and there was a spread that would make a Thanksgiving dinner look modest. But my stomach was in knots, not from hunger, but from fear. Every dish was a potential hazard, a hidden enemy that could send me to the hospital, or worse. As we all took our seats, the chatter around the table was lively, filled with the usual family gossip and stories. Jane was at the head of the table, presiding over the feast like a queen in her court. She called everyone to attention with a gentle tap of her glass. Before we begin, I just want to say how thrilled we are to be celebrating Liz and Alex's upcoming addition to our family, Jane announced, her voice steady and clear. There was a round of hear, hear, and applause. I forced a smile, feeling Alex squeeze my hand under the table. Thank you, everyone, I said. We're really looking forward to this new chapter in our lives. The meal began, and I tentatively picked at my food, choosing the simplest items. Alex watched me, his brow furrowed with concern. You doing okay? He asked quietly. Yeah, just being careful, I replied, pushing a roasted potato around my plate. Jane's eyes were on me, and I felt like a specimen under a microscope. Liz, you haven't touched your salad. The dressing is on the side, just as you like it, she said, her voice tinged with a forced cheerfulness. Thank you, Jane. I'm just not much of an appetite tonight, I said, avoiding the salad that I knew could easily contain hidden allergens. As the dinner wore on, the tension grew. Every time Jane offered me something, my anxiety spiked. The room felt hot, the walls inching closer with each passing minute. Then came the cake. It was a beautiful confection, layers of sponge and cream that made the room ooh and ah. Jane cut a slice and handed it to me with a smile that might have been genuine if I hadn't known better. For the mom-to-be, she said. I looked at the cake, then at Alex, then at Jane. I really shouldn't, I said, but it looks delicious. Oh, come on, Liz. One little bite won't hurt. For the baby, Jane pressed, her voice sweet as the icing. That's when Alex's dad, Mark, stepped in, his hand swift as he knocked the plate from my hands. The cake tumbled to the floor, and a stunned silence fell over the room. What the hell, Dad? Alex exclaimed, his voice a mix of anger and confusion. Mark stood, his face pale but his voice firm. I saw the label in the trash. That cake has peanut oil in it. The room erupted in chaos. Jane's face was the picture of shock, but her eyes gave her away. There was a flash of something there. Fear, maybe? Guilt? Alex stood, his chair clattering behind him. Mom, did you know about this? He demanded. Jane's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. And in that moment, the truth was as clear as the danger that had been on my plate. The room was dead silent after Mark's revelation, the dropped cake like a crime scene on the hardwood floor. Everyone's eyes were locked on Jane, who seemed to shrink under the collective gaze. Mom, is it true? Did you know? Alex's voice cut through the tension, sharp and demanding. Jane's eyes flickered with something dark before she regained her composure. Of course not. I would never. Her voice trailed off, unconvincing. Mark wasn't having any of it. I saw the shopping list, Jane. Peanut oil for cake. It was right there, in your handwriting, he said, his voice steady but laced with disappointment. The murmurs around the table grew louder, a mix of disbelief and anger bubbling up from the family. Alex was shaking his head, his hands balled into fists. How could you, Mom? Liz could have died. I was frozen in my seat, the gravity of the situation anchoring me down. This wasn't just carelessness or forgetfulness, it was intentional. Jane's mask finally slipped, her face twisted in anger. I didn't want it to come to this, but she's not right for you, Alex. She's weak, and now she's bringing a child into this world who will be just like her. Alex took a step toward his mother, incredulous. Weak? Liz is the strongest person I know. And you? How could you be so cruel? I could feel the eyes on me, waiting for me to break down, to crumble under the weight of Jane's words. But I didn't. Jane, I said, my voice surprisingly calm, you've made your feelings very clear. But this is not just about me. This is about a family, your grandchild. Jane looked away, her jaw clenched, and for the first time, I saw the hint of fear in her eyes. Maybe she realized that her actions hadn't just endangered me, but her relationship with her son, her reputation, everything. The rest of the evening was a blur. There were arguments, tears, and hushed conversations as the family tried to process what had happened. Alex and I left early, the weight of the evening heavy on our shoulders. We didn't speak much on the drive home. What was there to say? The truth was out, and with it, the facade of a polite, if not happy family was shattered, all because of a peanut. The drive home was quiet, The kind of silence that's heavy, filled with things unsaid. When we finally walked through our front door, Alex and I just stood there, the echo of the night's drama still ringing in our ears. Alex was the first to break the silence. "I can't believe my own mother would do something like that," he said, his voice hollow. I sat down on the couch, the cushion failing to comfort me. "I know, it's a lot to take in." He sat beside me, taking my hands in his. "I'm so sorry, Liz. It's unforgivable." I looked at him, seeing the pain in his eyes, and my heart ached. "It's not your fault, Alex. We couldn't have known she'd go this far." But the truth was there, hanging between us. Jane had crossed a line, and there was no going back. The family was in pieces. Some stood by us, shocked and appalled by Jane's actions, while others struggled to wrap their heads around the reality of the situation. The next few days were a whirlwind. Alex's phone buzzed constantly with messages and calls. Relatives wanted to express their shock, their support, their apologies. And through it all, there was a deafening silence from Jane. No apologies, no explanations, nothing. Alex finally broke the news to me a week later. "Dad's left her. He can't get past what she did. He said it's been a long time coming." I wasn't sure how to feel. Relief, sadness, pity? "And Jane?" I asked tentatively. "He said she's not handling it well. She's alone now," Alex replied, a twinge of something like regret in his tone. We sat in our living room, the walls we'd painted together, the furniture we'd picked out during countless trips to the store. It was our home, filled with our memories, our love. And outside, there was a storm brewing, one that threatened to uproot everything we knew. But in that moment, I realized that no matter what happened, we had each other. We were a team, about to bring a new life into the world, and that was what mattered. "I love you, Liz," Alex said, pulling me close. "I love you too," I whispered back. The fallout from that night would linger. The scars it left on our family would take time to heal. But as I looked at Alex, at the life we'd built, and the future we were about to embark on, I knew that we'd weather any storm together. And as for Jane, she was a chapter in our lives that we had closed, a story that we wouldn't let define us. From now on, it was just us, our baby, and the road ahead. Whatever it brought, we'd face it together. I'm Emily. I was a 25-year-old living a quiet, unremarkable existence with my boyfriend Mike, in a relationship that had seen better days. We'd been together since college, a pair drawn together more by familiarity than by the fervent passion of star-crossed lovers. Our arguments were frequent, often about Mike's disinterest in planning for the future, or his latest gaming marathon that would last well into the early hours, leaving me to sleep alone. We were two people dancing around the inevitable conversation of, "Where's this going?" without ever actually taking the floor. It's not that we didn't care for each other. It's just that somewhere along the line, we stopped trying to make it work. My parents, Sue and George, were the antithesis of us. Married for over 30 years, they still exchanged loving glances and shared private jokes, their bond seemingly unbreakable. They were my foundation, the steadfast love I aspired to find for myself, even if it wasn't going to be with Mike. On the evening of the crash, I remember arguing with Mike over something as trivial as unsorted laundry. He had promised to do it, and once again, the promise was as empty as the laundry basket was full. "Can't you just do one thing you say you're going to do?" I had asked, exasperation straining my voice. "It's just laundry, Em. It'll get done. Eventually," he had replied, his attention fixed on his computer screen. The argument had fizzled out as they usually did, with neither of us truly addressing the underlying issues. Later, as I sat in the back seat of my parents' car, the warmth of their chatter was a soothing balm to the residual frustration from the argument with Mike. They were celebrating another year of Mom's life, and their joy was infectious. Then, the world turned on its axis. Headlights merged with the sound of metal on metal, and everything went black. When I awoke, it was to the antiseptic smell of a hospital, the relentless beeping of the heart monitor, and a heavy blanket of dread. The doctor's words were clinical and detached, but the message was clear. My parents didn't make it, and my legs, my perfectly normal, taken-for-granted legs, might never carry me again. The truth settled like a stone in my stomach. I was suddenly, terrifyingly alone. Mike, the man I had just argued with about laundry, was now my only connection to a life before the crash. The life where my biggest worry was whether he'd sort the whites from the colors. As the reality of my parents' absence and my potential paralysis began to truly register, a hollow despair took root in me. The future, once a landscape of possibilities, now seemed like a barren field. The hospital room was a bubble where time moved both too quickly and not at all. After what seemed like an eternity of white walls and echoing silence, Mike walked in, his parents, Janet and Bob, a step behind him. The atmosphere was thick with a somberness that made my heart sink even lower, if that was possible. Mike pulled a chair up next to my bed and took my hand, his usual bravado absent. His parents stood by the door, a united front of awkward concern. "Hey, Em," Mike began, his voice a rough whisper. "I've been doing some thinking, a lot of thinking, actually." "Thinking?" I echoed, my voice dull. "About what?" "About us," he said, and his eyes met mine, filled with an emotion I couldn't quite place. All of this, it's made me see how short life can be." I wanted to say something, to ask what he meant, but the words seemed to stick in my throat. "I don't want to wait for the perfect moment anymore because it might never come," he continued, squeezing my hand. "What I'm trying to say is, will you marry me, Emily?" The question hung in the air, heavy and unexpected. It was the last thing I thought I'd hear, especially now. I searched his face for a sign of the impulsive Mike I knew, the one who acted first and thought later. But all I saw was earnestness. His mother, Janet, stepped forward, her hands clasped in front of her. "We want you to be a part of our family, Emily. We'll take care of you." "And it's not out of pity," Bob added quickly. "It's because we love you, and we want to support Mike in taking this step." I was stunned, my mind racing. This was a lifeline, unexpected, and maybe even a little reckless, but a lifeline nonetheless. I looked at Mike, really looked at him, and saw not just my sometimes immature boyfriend, but a man offering his support in the most uncertain time of my life. "Mike, My voice trailed off as I tried to gather my thoughts. "It's okay, Em. You don't have to decide right now. I just wanted you to know how I feel," he said, his thumb rubbing circles on the back of my hand. I thought about my parents, about the unwavering love and support they had always shown me. Wasn't this what they would have wanted? For me to be loved and cared for, no matter what? "Mike, I don't know what the future holds for me, for us. But yes," I found myself saying, the words stronger than I felt. "Yes, I'll marry you." A smile, the first genuine one I'd seen in days, spread across Mike's face. Janet let out a soft sob, covering her mouth with her hand, and even Bob's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Moving into my parents' house with Mike should have been a fresh start, a new chapter. The house was too big for just one person, and everywhere I looked, I saw memories of my parents. I thought having Mike with me would fill some of those empty spaces, but I was quickly learning that his presence was a reminder of what was missing, not a replacement. The first few days, he was attentive, always checking on me, making sure I had everything I needed within reach. But as days turned into weeks, the attentive husband act began to wear thin. Mike started spending more time on his computer, his headphones on, shutting me out. One evening, as I maneuvered my wheelchair into the kitchen, I found him staring blankly at his screen. "Mike, have you thought about looking for a new job?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. "The insurance won't cover everything, and the bills are starting to pile up." He didn't look away from the screen. "I told you, Em, I'm taking care of you now. That's my job." "But I can take care of myself during the day," I pushed back, feeling a twinge of frustration. "You don't need to be here all the time." Finally, he turned to face me, his expression a mix of irritation and something else I couldn't quite read. "What do you want from me, Em? I'm here, aren't I?" I was taken aback by his tone. "Being physically here isn't the same as being present, Mike. I need a partner, not just a roommate." He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the tile. You know what, Em? Maybe I need more than this too. Maybe I wasn't cut out to be a nursemaid. His words stung, and I watched him storm out, the door slamming behind him. I was left alone in the silence of the kitchen, the weight of his words settling around me like dust. I wasn't just alone. I was lonely. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I couldn't help but think about how quickly our modest honeymoon period had ended. The vows we had taken felt like they were from another lifetime. The Mike, who had lovingly promised to be by my side, in sickness and in health, seemed like a stranger now. As the weeks dragged on, his absences grew longer, and the excuses more flimsy. He was either out with friends or lost in a digital world that didn't seem to have room for me. I felt like an obstacle in his life, a burden he hadn't anticipated. One particularly tough day, when the pain was bad, and the house felt more like a mausoleum than a home, I heard the front door open. Expecting Mike, I called out, "Is that you?" "Yeah, it's me," he replied, his voice distant. "I'm just grabbing a few things, then I'm heading out again." I wheeled myself to the hallway, watching as he rifled through a drawer for his keys. "Going out with friends?" I asked, trying to mask the hurt in my voice. He paused, keys in hand, and sighed. I need some space, okay? It's not easy for me either, all this." I nodded, biting back tears. "I know. I just thought we could maybe spend some time together, like we used to." He shrugged, avoiding my eyes. "Maybe when things settle down a bit, I gotta go." The house felt emptier with each passing day, a vast space filled with silence and the ghost of better times. It wasn't just Mike's absence or the silence left in the wake of my parents' voices. It was the small things that started to go missing. A vase my mother loved, a silver frame holding a family photo, a painting that used to hang in the hallway. I first noticed it when I was trying to distract myself with memories. I wheeled myself into the living room, intent on looking through the photo albums. But as my eyes scanned the room, they fell on the bare patch of wall where the painting had been. Confusion knotted my brow. "Mike!" I called out, unsure when he had last gone out. There was no answer, and the emptiness of the house seemed to echo back at me. That evening, when Mike returned, I asked him, "Have you seen the landscape painting that used to be in the hallway?" He barely glanced up from his phone. "Oh, that old thing? Yeah, it was getting dusty, and I figured we could use the space for something else." Something about his casual dismissal didn't sit right with me. "But it was my mom's favorite," I said, a tremor of unease in my voice. He shrugged, his attention still half on his screen. "We can get another painting, Em. It's no big deal." But it was a big deal. The items that went missing next were unmistakable, things that had been in my family for years. One afternoon, I caught Janet, Mike's mom, in the act. She was bustling around the living room with a big black garbage bag. "Janet, what are you doing?" I asked, my voice sharp with alarm. She jumped, a guilty flush creeping up her neck. "Oh, just some spring cleaning, dear. This place is cluttered with so many old things." "But those are my things," I protested, my heart rate picking up. There, she cooed, her voice sickly sweet. "We're just making things nicer for you. You'll thank us later." I watched her like a hawk every time she visited after that, but the thefts became sneakier, more calculated. And every time I brought it up, I was met with reassurances that it was all in my best interest. One night, lying in bed, I turned to Mike, who was scrolling through his phone, as had become his nighttime ritual. "Mike, your parents have been taking things from the house. My things." He didn't look up. "Mom's just trying to help. You know she's got a knack for this stuff." "Help?" I echoed, disbelief coloring my tone. "By taking my parents' belongings?" He sighed, finally setting his phone down and turning to face me. "Look, Em, they think we should be looking forward, not backward. They're just trying to take some of the load off you." I wanted to scream, to rage against the violation, the disrespect. But I was tired of fighting, tired of questioning my own sanity. "This isn't what I want," I whispered, the fight draining out of me. Mike reached over and patted my hand, a gesture that felt more patronizing than comforting. "Try to get some sleep, Em. Things will look better in the morning." I couldn't take it anymore and confided in Anna, my closest friend who was also a massage therapist. She had been helping with my rehabilitation, her visits a rare source of relief. "Anna, things are going missing around the house," I confided as she worked on my stiff muscles. "And I can't shake the feeling that Mike and his parents are behind it." Anna paused, her hands stilling on my shoulders. "Have you talked to Mike about this?" "I have, but he just brushes it off. Says his parents are helping us by decluttering." I let out a hollow laugh. "But it's only my family's things that are disappearing." Anna's brows furrowed in concern. "That doesn't sound right, Em. Do you want me to do something? Maybe come by more often? Keep an eye out?" The idea sparked something in me, a plan forming from the embers of my frustration. "Could you, I don't know, maybe help me set up some sort of camera or something to record what's going on when I'm not in the room?" With a nod of determination, Anna agreed. "I'll bring something over tomorrow. We'll get to the bottom of this." True to her word, Anna came back the next day with some discreet recording devices, which she placed in strategic locations around the house. It felt like something out of a spy movie, and if I wasn't so desperate for the truth, I might have laughed at the absurdity of it all. A few days later, Anna returned with the recordings, and we sat down to listen. The voices of Mike and his parents filled the room, and the blood in my veins turned to ice as their scheme unfolded through their casual conversation. "And once we get her committed, the house and everything in it will be ours," Mike's voice said, clear and cold. "Yeah, the place will sell for a fortune, and all those antiques? Pure profit," his mother added, her tone greedy. "We just need to make sure Emily doesn't catch on before we have everything in place," his father chimed in. Tears streamed down my face as I listened to their betrayal. These people, who had promised to care for me, to be my family, were plotting against me. Anna reached over, her hand gripping mine tightly. "We have to do something, Em," she said, her voice laced with anger. I wiped my eyes, the sorrow quickly giving way to a steely resolve. "We will. I'm not going to let them get away with this." The morning after listening to the recordings, I tried to act normal, but every word they said, every smile they gave, felt like a lie. It was during breakfast when I noticed something was off. The usual noise of the city that drifted in through the open window was absent. I wheeled myself over to see what was happening, only to find that the ramps that allowed me access to the garden were gone. "Mike!" I called out, my voice laced with panic. "Where are the ramps?" He came into the room, feigning ignorance. "The ramps? Oh, they were looking a bit worn. Thought they needed fixing." I stared at him, the man I thought I knew. "And you didn't think to tell me? How am I supposed to get around?" His gaze was evasive as he shrugged. "I just thought you'd be safer inside for now. You know, until we get new ones." The room felt like it was spinning, and it wasn't from my injury. Safer? Or trapped? The words slipped out before I could stop them. He didn't respond, just turned and walked away, leaving me stewing in a mix of anger and helplessness. Later, when I asked Janet about it, she was syrupy sweet with false concern. "We're just looking out for you, dear. We wouldn't want you to have an accident," she said, touching my shoulder with feigned tenderness. I pulled away from her touch, feeling the sting of their deceit. "I didn't realize needing ramps qualified as a hazard," I replied, my voice steady though my insides were shaking. Janet's eyes hardened for a moment before she regained her composure. "We're just trying to help, Emily. It's for the best." That night, as I lay in bed, the darkness felt oppressive. Mike was out again, probably drowning his guilt in cheap beer and cheaper thrills. I reached for my phone, the screen a small beacon in the dark, and dialed the number Anna had given me for emergencies. "Anna," I whispered when she picked up, "they've removed the ramps. I'm literally trapped in my own home." Her voice was firm, a lifeline in the tumultuous sea I was drowning in. "Hang tight, Em. I'm going to make some calls. We're going to sort this out." Next day, I was in the kitchen when I heard the doorbell. My heart pounded as I maneuvered towards the entrance. It was Anna, flanked by a man and woman wearing crisp suits and stern expressions. They were from a local disability rights organization, here to assess my living situation. Beside them was my lawyer, Mr. Hammond, clutching a leather briefcase. "Emily, we're here to make things right," Anna said, her determination matching the resolve in my chest. Mr. Hammond stepped forward. "We need to establish the facts first, Emily. I'll need to see the house. Check against the inventory of your parents' belongings." As we moved through the house, the representatives from the service took notes, their disapproval clear at the missing ramps and the blatant disregard for my welfare. Mike walked in during the commotion, surprise etching his face. "Em, what's going on? Who are these people?" I looked at him, really looked at him, allowing the full weight of my gaze to settle on his shoulders. "I'm taking back control, Mike. This is my lawyer, and these are advocates for people with disabilities. They're here to ensure my home is safe and that my rights are respected." Janet and Bob entered the fray, confusion turning to fear as they realized the seriousness of the situation. "Emily, darling, what is this about?" Janet's voice trembled. "It's about my rights, my home, and the truth," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "Mr. Hammond is here to confirm the inventory of my inheritance." Mr. Hammond opened his briefcase, pulling out documents and photographs. "We have detailed records of all items bequeathed to Mrs. Harper. It seems several are missing." Bob's face paled. "Now, Emily, I'm sure this is all just a misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding," I replied, the recordings Anna had provided playing in my head. "And I have more than just missing items to discuss." Mike's parents looked at each other, the facade of the caring in-laws crumbling before my eyes. Mike stood there, silent, the reality of the situation dawning on him. Anna moved closer to me. "We also have evidence of the conversations you've had regarding Emily's property and well-being." The advocates from the Disability Service spoke up. "Removing access to the ramps is a direct violation of Mrs. Harper's rights. We'll be taking action." As Mr. Hammond laid out the evidence of their theft and their plans for my future, I saw the trap I had been in from the outside. But now, the tables had turned. I was no longer the victim in their game. I was the one calling the shots. Mike finally found his voice. I can explain." But I shook my head. "Save it, Mike. I've heard enough." Janet started to cry, and Bob put an arm around her, but there was no comfort to be found in their deceit. The day of the trial was a culmination of everything I had endured. The courtroom was stark, the air thick with tension. Mike and his parents were on one side, looking nothing like the family that had once promised to care for me. I was on the other, with Anna beside me and Mr. Hammond at the ready, with his briefcase of evidence. As the proceedings began, the judge looked down at us from his bench, his gaze lingering on me for a moment. "We are here to examine the evidence regarding the allegations of theft and the premeditated exploitation of Emily Harper," he said. Mr. Hammond presented the recordings, the inventory discrepancies, and testimonies from the disability advocates. The evidence was damning, and Mike's family could do little but squirm under the weight of their own deceit. Janet sobbed quietly, her sobs a soundtrack to the unraveling of their scheme. "We never meant for things to go this far," she whispered, when it was her turn to speak. The judge's voice was firm as he addressed them. "You took advantage of a vulnerable person. There's no excuse for your actions." Mike stood, his voice barely audible. "I'm sorry, Em. I never wanted to hurt you." I looked at him, the history we shared playing out in a flash before my eyes. "Sorry isn't enough, Mike. You chose this path." The gavel came down like the final word on the life I had once known. Mike and his parents were found guilty. Reparations were ordered, and they were to have no further contact with me. With the help of Anna and a dedicated team, I started physical therapy. Each small movement was a victory, each step a testament to my resilience. My legs, once lifeless, began to tingle with new strength. One day, as I managed to stand with the help of parallel bars, Anna cheered me on. "Look at you, Em, you're doing it!" The smile on my face was mirrored in her own. "I am, aren't I?" The joy bubbled up from a place I thought had been broken beyond repair. And so, I moved forward, one day at a time. The house, once a mausoleum of my past life, was slowly transformed back into a home, a sanctuary where I healed and grew stronger. I'm Jane. I had just turned 28 when I thought I met the love of my life, Mike, and everything happened so fast. We were married within a year of meeting. Mike is an accountant, tall, with a laugh that could light up any room. I work in digital marketing, love to paint on weekends, and I have always been more of a planner. We balanced each other out, or so I thought. It was the day after our wedding, and our living room was piled high with wrapped presents and envelopes. There was a chaotic beauty to it all, the remnants of our celebration. That's when Mike's parents, Carol and Dave, dropped by. I hadn't really gotten to know them since we got married so quickly, but they seemed all right, normal even. As we started opening gifts, I noticed Carol and Dave were more than just a little interested in the contents. "Is that a crystal vase?" Carol asked, picking up a shimmering piece that my aunt had given us. She turned it over in her hands, eyes gleaming. "Yeah, it's from my Aunt Linda. Pretty, isn't it?" I said, trying to nudge her attention away from claiming it. Before I knew it, Carol had placed it in a separate pile to the side. "I think we can find a good place for this at our house," she said nonchalantly. Mike didn't seem to notice, busy untangling a set of fancy kitchen gadgets from his cousin. I shot him a look, hoping he'd say something. "Mom, that's our wedding gift," Mike finally said with an easy smile, as if it was all a big joke. "Oh, come on, it'll just collect dust here. We'll use it," Dave chimed in, wrapping an arm around Carol. "Besides, you two are young. You'll get plenty more gifts over the years." I tried to laugh it off with them, but it felt off. "Actually, I was thinking it would look great in our foyer," I said, attempting to claim it back without causing a scene. Carol looked at me, her expression a mix of surprise and annoyance. "Jane, you need to learn to share. We're family now, and families help each other out," she said, her tone firm, as if she was teaching me some sort of lesson. Mike, catching the tension, quickly jumped in. "Let's not worry about this now. We've got plenty of gifts, right, Jane?" I nodded, biting back my words. But as they continued to sift through the gifts, setting aside a few choice items for themselves, that uncomfortable feeling settled deep in my stomach. It was like watching strangers claim parts of my life as their own. And Mike, well, he just let them. Our first year of marriage flew by, and before I knew it, our anniversary had arrived. I wanted to make it special, a celebration of us. So I booked a table at Chez Louis, a cozy little spot we both loved. I thought it would be romantic to have Mike's parents join us, to show them they're important to us. As we sat down at the restaurant, Carol and Dave were already there, menus in hand. "This place is fancy," Carol said, eyeing the chandeliers. Mike squeezed my hand under the table, a silent "thank you" for organizing it all. The waiter came by and we started to order. I went for the salmon, Mike's favorite, and I noticed Carol's eyes darting down the menu to the most expensive items. "We'll have the lobster and the filet mignon," she declared, pointing at the priciest things without a second glance. Dave nodded in agreement. "And why not throw in a bottle of your best wine?" he added, winking at the waiter. I could feel my smile stiffening. "Quite the celebration, huh?" I tried to keep my voice light. Mike shrugged. "It's a special night," he said. "Let's not think about the cost tonight." The conversation was light for the most part, but I couldn't help but notice how Carol and Dave savored the food like it was their last meal, almost oblivious to the price tag I knew would come at the end. As we ate, I couldn't shake the feeling of being taken advantage of. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was the principle. It was our anniversary, and it felt like it was being hijacked. When the check arrived, I saw Mike's eyes widen a little, but he quickly recovered and handed his card to the waiter. On our way out, Carol looped her arm through mine. "You know, Jane, this was just lovely. We should do it again next year," she said, a satisfied smile on her face. Thanksgiving was around the corner, and with it came the start of the holiday season. Mike and I had started to decorate the house, a mix of fall colors and early Christmas cheer. It was cozy, the kind of place you'd want to come back to after a long day. One evening, as we were stringing up some lights around the living room windows, Mike's phone pinged with a message. He read it and laughed. "Oh, my parents are ahead of the game. They've already sent their Christmas wish list." I was untangling another set of lights and looked up. "Wish list?" "Yeah, they send one every year. Helps with shopping. he explained, his fingers scrolling through his phone. Curiosity got the better of me. So, what's on this famous list? Mike hesitated, then handed me his phone. The list was extensive. Top-tier electronics, designer clothes, luxury items that they probably didn't even need. I scrolled through in disbelief. They can't be serious, I said. This is a lot. Mike took his phone back and shrugged. They like the good stuff. What can I say? I didn't know how to respond. There was a knot forming in the pit of my stomach. Mike's birthday was also coming up, and I'd been so excited to give him the watch he'd been eyeing for months. Now it felt like any gift would be less about us and more about fulfilling a list. When it came to us making our list, I couldn't help but feel petty making one at all. Maybe we should just ask for charitable donations in our name, I suggested half-heartedly. Mike laughed. Good one, but seriously, what do you want? You need a new laptop, right? The holidays rolled around, and I got Carol and Dave a nice coffee maker. Nothing too fancy but practical. They, in turn, gave me a set of scented candles. They were nice, but the difference was stark. I didn't say anything. Mike seemed happy with the fancy drone they got him, though. The unspoken rule was clear. We were expected to give big and receive small. It didn't feel right, but bringing it up only seemed to cause tension. So, I kept quiet, wrapping gifts and pasting on a smile for the holidays. But inside, I was beginning to count the costs, not just in dollars, but in the emotional toll this was starting to take. I was at my desk, staring at the computer screen when the email notification popped up. It was my quarterly bonus, bigger than I had expected. My first thought was to do something meaningful with it, something for Mike and me. So, I booked us a trip to Paris. We had talked about going since we met, and it felt like the perfect time to make that dream happen. That night over dinner, I told Mike about the surprise. His face lit up like I'd never seen before. Paris? Really? Babe, that's amazing! He exclaimed, getting up to kiss me. I was basking in the joy of the moment when his phone rang. It was his mom. I could tell by the way his face changed. Yeah, she booked us a trip to Paris, he said into the phone, and I knew I should have asked him not to say anything just yet. Mike's enthusiasm dwindled as he listened more and more. I know you've always wanted to go. He trailed off, looking at me with a pained expression. I felt my heart sink. He hung up and there was a heavy silence. They want to come with us, he said finally, almost like he was asking for permission. I sat there, my fork halfway to my mouth, paused in midair. To Paris? With us? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Yeah. They said they've never been and always wanted to go, Mike explained, running a hand through his hair. I think we should take them. The room felt suddenly too small. It's supposed to be for us, Mike. Our trip, I said, feeling a tightness in my chest. He didn't respond at first, then, I know, but they're getting older, and I feel bad. They've done so much for me. I thought about all the one-sided gift exchanges, the anniversary dinner, and every other little thing that had piled up over the past year. But this is our time, I insisted, my voice firm. We can plan a trip with them another time. This bonus, it's for us. Mike sighed, a deep, frustrated sound. They won't understand that. You know how they are. And you know how hard I've worked for this, I said, the words like stones in my mouth. I want us to enjoy it together, just us, like we planned. Mike didn't say anything for a while. Then, okay, we'll tell them some other time might work better. But when the time came to tell them, Mike's words faltered. Look, maybe we can all go together next year, he offered, but Carol was having none of it. Why next year? We can afford it now, she retorted over the speakerphone, her voice laced with disappointment. I couldn't take it anymore. Because this trip is for us, Carol, Mike and I. We need this time together, I said, unable to hide my frustration. There was a pause, then Carol said, Well, that's very selfish of you, Jane. Very selfish indeed. After the call, the air between Mike and me was tense. He was torn, I could tell, but this was one thing I wasn't willing to budge on. Paris was meant to be a dream trip for us, and I wasn't going to let that dream be taken away. Mike became a shadow in his own home, leaving early for work and coming back late. Our conversations dwindled to monosyllables. "Dinner's in the oven," I'd say when I heard the garage door open, my voice echoing off the empty walls. "Thanks," he'd reply, a hollow word that hung in the air between us. I missed him, missed us. I yearned for the easy days when we'd dream together on the couch, our plans and laughter intertwined. I longed to reach out to him, to break through the invisible barrier that had erected itself after the argument over Paris. But every attempt felt like speaking through a thick glass wall. I could see him, but I couldn't reach him. One particularly hard evening, I sat at the dinner table across from Mike, the sound of his fork against the plate drilling into the silence. I cleared my throat. "Mike, this can't go on," I started, my voice barely above a whisper, fearful of shattering the fragile peace. "We need to talk about what happened. We can't let this silence be the new normal for us." Mike continued to eat, his expression unreadable. Then he set down his fork, a sign that I had his attention, even if just for a moment. "What do you want me to say, Jane?" he asked, a hint of weariness seeping through. "I want to understand why you're taking this so hard, why it feels like you're choosing them over me," I replied, the hurt evident in my tone. He sighed, his hands folded in front of him. "They're my parents, Jane. They've been hoping to go to Paris their whole lives." "And what about what we've been hoping for? Our plans? Our dreams?" My own frustration started to bubble up, words becoming more pointed, desperate to bridge the gap between us. Mike ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of exasperation I'd come to recognize. I know," he said, and for a moment, I saw the flicker of the man I married, conflicted and torn, but not indifferent. "It's just, they've always been there for me. I feel obligated, you know." "But where does that leave us, Mike?" I pressed, leaning forward, trying to catch his eye. "What about our marriage?" He didn't respond right away, and in that pause, I felt a wave of fear. Fear that maybe we weren't as solid as I had believed, that maybe the foundation we had built was less rock and more sand, easily eroded by the steady tide of his parents' needs and wants. "It's supposed to be us against the world, Mike, not me against you and them," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the emotion welling up inside me. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I could see the conflict warring within him. "I know, Jane. I just don't know how to make everyone happy." "That's just it," I said, a sudden clarity washing over me. We can't always make everyone happy. But we made vows to each other, Mike. Doesn't that count for something?" He nodded slowly, his gaze lingering on the table before finding mine. "It does. It counts for a lot." The rest of the meal passed in a contemplative silence, a change from the strained quiet that had become our norm. It was as if my words had planted a seed, or perhaps watered one that had been lying dormant within Mike all this time. The morning sun poured in through the windows, but the warmth it usually brought seemed to have no place in our home today. I woke up to an eerie quiet, the other side of the bed untouched from the night before. The emptiness of the house felt like a heavy blanket, suffocating in its silence. Rubbing the sleep from my eyes, I reached for my phone, expecting the usual absence of messages, given the silent treatment that had taken residence in our home. Instead, my screen was flooded with notifications, all from my bank. A lump formed in my throat as I read the details. Multiple transactions, including airline tickets and a pair of hotel bookings in Paris, all made while I was asleep. The timestamps on the emails told me the flight would have left hours ago. Mike and his parents were already on their way to Paris, using my hard-earned bonus to fund a trip I was meant to be on. Disbelief turned to anger, and then to a crushing sense of betrayal. I sat there, the phone heavy in my hand as the reality settled in. Mike had access to my account. I'd trusted him implicitly, never imagining he would abuse that trust. Yet, here it was in stark black and white, a digital paper trail of deceit. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The one person I had believed would stand by me had chosen his own comfort over our relationship. I thought back to all the times I'd brushed aside the little signs, the excuses I'd made for him, for us. With trembling fingers, I dialed his number, knowing full well he wouldn't answer. Not with the time difference, not with my previous ultimatum ringing in his ears. "Mike," I began, the beep of the voicemail almost mocking in its cheerfulness. "I saw the charges. You took your parents to Paris with my bonus. I don't even know what to say, but I hope it's worth it. I hope it's worth everything." The house felt even emptier after the call, the walls closing in on me with the weight of everything unsaid, and now, perhaps, never to be spoken. I sat at the kitchen table, the silence a stark contrast to the chaos raging within me. They had left, just like that, with no regard for me or the life we were supposed to be building together. I canceled the hotel rooms, the return flights, every piece of the trip that was connected to my finances. With each cancellation, I felt a piece of my old life fall away, the future I'd envisioned evaporating before my eyes. By the time I was done, there was nothing left to do but act. I contacted the bank and removed Mike's access to my accounts, a finality in each click that felt both terrifying and liberating. The man I had married, the family I had tried to be a part of, they were all just strangers now. Strangers who had used me, who had seen my generosity as something to exploit rather than cherish. I packed my bags with a robotic efficiency, each item a reminder of a dream I had to put away. There was no going back from this, no gentle words or apologies that could mend the rift that his betrayal had caused. Mike had chosen his path, and in doing so, he had set me on mine. The ring I'd once worn with pride lay cold and heavy in my palm. I set it down on the counter, its sparkle mocking in the morning light, and with one last look at the life I was leaving behind, I closed the door on the house that was never truly a home. It was late afternoon when I finally left the house. My car was packed with clothes and essentials, a stark reminder of the sudden turn my life had taken. As I drove, the messages began to flood in. One from Mike, several from his mother. I pulled over to read them, knowing they'd only fuel the fire of my resolve. Mike's message read, "Jane, please, we need to talk about this. Can't we just discuss it?" His words seemed hollow, almost insulting in their simplicity. I started to type a response, then stopped. No words would bridge the chasm between us. His mother's messages were a mix of confusion and anger. "What's going on? Why have you canceled our rooms? Call me." I imagined her sitting in a cafe in Paris, expecting luxury and finding complication. I turned the phone off. They were in the middle of a trip funded by deceit. They could figure it out. My first stop was the bank. I needed to ensure my finances were completely secure. The bank manager, a middle-aged woman with a gentle face, greeted me. "I need to make sure all my accounts are locked down. My husband, he won't have access anymore," I explained, my voice steady despite the emotion I felt. "Of course," she nodded, offering a sympathetic smile. "Let's make sure you're protected." By the time I left the bank, my accounts were secure, and a new sense of determination settled within me. I drove to my sister's house, the only place I felt I could go. She opened the door before I could even knock. "Jane, I've been so worried," she said, pulling me into a hug. I allowed myself a moment to just be held, to let the reality of my situation be shared. "I can't believe he would do this to you," she said as we sat down at her kitchen table. "You deserve so much better." I nodded, swallowing hard against the lump in my throat. "I do, and that's why I'm not going back. I've canceled everything. I've left the house. I'm done, Sarah." She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "Good for you. What's your plan now?" I looked around the familiar room, feeling the first twinge of relief. "I'm not sure yet, but I'm starting with a divorce. I can't stay married to someone who has so little respect for me." Sarah's face was a mixture of anger and pride. "I'll support you however I can. Do you need a lawyer?" "I'll find one," I said, my voice growing firmer with each word. "I need someone who doesn't know Mike or his family. I need this cut clean." The conversation shifted as Sarah helped me unpack my car and make plans for the next few days. There was a strange comfort in the mundane tasks, a grounding in the midst of chaos. I was standing in the kitchen at my sister's house, a mug of coffee warming my hands when my phone vibrated with a persistence that felt all too familiar. It was Mike, again. "Jane, we need to talk. I'm sorry, I miss you, and I think we can work things out." His text read, a mixture of apology and plea. I sighed, the same rehearsed, "I'm sorry," becoming a threadbare blanket that no longer provided comfort or warmth. "Not this time, Mike," I muttered under my breath, typing a response that left no room for ambiguity. "There's nothing left to discuss. Please respect my decision." I could almost hear the desperation in the silence that followed, but it wasn't enough to make me reconsider. Not anymore. My resolve was tested further when, a few days later, Mike's parents made a dramatic appearance at my sister's doorstep. Their faces were twisted in anger as they barged past Sarah, who stood wide-eyed at the door. "You've got some nerve, Jane," his mother exclaimed, her voice shrill. "You ruined our family vacation. You're just a greedy, selfish woman." Sarah stepped between us, her stance protective. "That's enough! You're not going to come into my house and insult my sister." The argument escalated until the neighbors peeked out of their windows, and I was sure someone would call the police. It ended with Sarah threatening to do just that if they didn't leave. Their departure left a sour air that lingered long after they were gone. But amidst the chaos, a realization settled within me. I was truly done. The divorce process was a cold, legal ballet, and I danced my part, signing papers and nodding through explanations of settlements and divisions. But with each stroke of the pen, I felt a chain breaking, a tether loosening. And then it was over. I stood outside the courthouse, a free woman. The air was crisp, a gentle wind playing with the loose strands of my hair. Sarah hugged me tight, her support unwavering. "You did it, Jane," she whispered, pride evident in her voice. I had done it. I had stood up to the selfishness that tried to claim me, stood firm against the manipulation that sought to keep me bound. I turned away from the courthouse, away from a past that no longer held me. The messages from Mike continued for a while, a mix of apologies, bargaining, and eventually anger. But they went unread, floating in the digital void as I moved forward with my life. The apartment I rented was small, but bathed in sunlight. I filled it with plants, books, and new memories. I went back to school, enrolling in classes that fueled a passion for learning that I'd neglected. And one quiet evening, as I sat on my little balcony, a cup of tea in hand, I deleted Mike's number from my phone. I was free. Free to heal, free to grow, and most importantly, free to be unapologetically me. My name is Elaine, and at 55, I find myself in the sterile quietude of a hospital room, the IV drip a constant reminder of the battle I'm facing, cancer. The cold touch of the sheets is a stark contrast to the warmth I used to feel at home, now a distant memory. 15 years have lapsed since I walked down the aisle to George, a widower with a bright-eyed daughter, Mia. She was 10, all pigtails and toothy smiles, eagerly accepting me not just as her father's wife, but as a mother in spirit. She became the daughter I never had, the unexpected joy in a marriage I thought would fill the pages of my life with love and companionship. George was a man of stature, a businessman whose allure was as much about his charisma as it was the way he seemed ready to build a new life with me. But time has a way of eroding facades, and his once tender patience gave way to relentless demands. I'd trudge home from my job as a financial analyst, a role that demanded precision and left little room for error, only to find a second shift awaiting me. A test of my domestic diligence I was bound to fail in his eyes. I remember his exacting standards, the way he'd scrutinize the dinner table. "Elaine, is this the best you could do?" he'd ask, barely looking at the carefully prepared dishes before him. His words were like weights, each one piling on until I felt I could barely stand. Yet I continued to cook, clean, and care for him, even when my body screamed for rest. My parents, God bless them, would often tell me, "Elaine, you need to take care of yourself too." But their advice would fall on deaf ears. I was too caught up in the cycle of appeasement. It's during one of these silent meals that my cell phone vibrates, startling me from my thoughts. It's Mia. Her voice is a balm to my tired spirit. "Mom, how are you holding up?" I try to sound stronger than I feel. "I'm hanging in there, sweetie. How are you?" She's silent for a beat too long, and I know she's carrying a weight too heavy for her young shoulders. "I'm worried about you, Mom. Dad, he doesn't seem to care." Her words are a punch to the gut, but not unexpected. George's absence in these sterile white walls has been as loud as the blips on the monitors beside me. "Mia, love, I know. It's okay. We have each other," I say, the words tasting like a mix of sadness and resolve. There's a pause, and then her voice, laced with a quiet strength, comes through. "We do, and I'm here, every step of the way. Don't worry about Dad. Worry about getting better." Her reassurance is the anchor I didn't know I needed. When she visits, we don't talk about George, or the cold dinners, or the way his eyes no longer held any warmth for me. Instead, we talk about her job, the books she's reading, the life she's building. Her resilience and independence make me proud, and I cling to the fact that I played some part in shaping the incredible woman she's become. I lie back, closing my eyes as Mia's promises echo in my mind. The hospital room feels less confining somehow, as if her words have breathed life into its corners. I am not alone, and that's a thought worth holding on to. The day starts before the sun peeks over the horizon, my alarm clock a relentless foe. I'm up, pulling on the clothes I laid out the night before, my movements as automatic as the coffee maker that sputters to life in the kitchen. George is still asleep, the rise and fall of his chest the only evidence of life. At work, the numbers and spreadsheets are a welcome distraction. They don't complain, they don't demand, they just exist in their black and white cells, waiting for me to make sense of them. My colleagues are another story, buzzing around with office gossip and weekend plans. "Elaine, you've got to come out with us one of these Fridays," Janet from accounting says, popping her head into my cubicle. I manage a smile, though I can't remember the last time I had plans that didn't involve George or a grocery list. "Thanks, Janet. Maybe next time." She gives me a sympathetic pat on the shoulder before buzzing off to her next conversation. Home again, the routine continues. I'm chopping vegetables for the stew George likes when he walks in, early from work. His mood's a toss-up. I brace myself for whatever version of him is coming through the door. "Smells good," he says, which feels like a small victory. I let out the breath I've been holding. "It should be ready in about an hour," I respond, keeping my tone even. He grunts, disappearing into the living room. The TV comes to life, and I'm left alone in the kitchen with the carrots and potatoes. I find comfort in the rhythm of my knife against the cutting board, a simple, predictable sound. Later, we sit across from each other at the dining table, a chasm of unsaid words between us. He's scrolling through his phone, barely acknowledging the meal. "It's good," he mumbles after a few minutes, but there's a distance in his voice that's become all too familiar. I nod, my own phone lighting up with a text from Mia. "Thinking of you, Mom. Hope dinner went well." I type back a quick, "Love you," and slip the phone back into my pocket. George looks up, eyes narrowing. "Was that Mia?" "Yeah, just checking in," I say, trying to keep the conversation light. He nods, going back to his phone, and we finish dinner in silence. I clean up, the clinking of dishes filling the empty air. Tomorrow will be the same, the grind wearing away like waves on a cliffside, constant and relentless. But tonight, Mia's message is a lifeline, a reminder that not everything is as cold and unforgiving as this routine. There's warmth there, love, and it's enough to keep me going for one more day. The hospital room's constant beeps and murmurs are background noise as I'm lost in thought. It's during one of these quiet moments that Mia walks in, her face etched with worry. I can tell she's bearing a weight, the kind that's ready to topple over. She pulls a chair close to my bed, takes my hand, and sighs deeply. "Mom, there's something you should know," she begins, her voice a mix of anger and sorrow. I squeeze her hand, encouraging her to continue. "What is it, Mia?" "It's about Dad," she pauses, gathering her thoughts. He has someone else." The words hang heavily between us. I had felt the presence of someone in our lives, an invisible intruder, but hearing it confirmed sends a chill through me. "He introduced her to me, Mom." Mia's voice cracks. As his future wife. The air feels thick, like I'm breathing through cotton. I try to absorb the shock, to maintain some sense of composure for Mia's sake. But inside, I'm reeling. When? The word comes out as a whisper. Last week. He told me he was serious about her, Mia replies, her eyes not leaving mine, a silent apology in her gaze. There's a long pause as I process this betrayal. Thank you for telling me, sweetheart, I managed to say at last. How long have you known? Just a few days, she admits. I didn't want to upset you, but I thought it's better you hear it from me. The dull hum of the hospital seems to fade into silence. I'm grateful for her honesty, yet the pain is sharp, unyielding. I nod, feeling an odd sense of calm amidst the turmoil. We'll deal with this, I say, more to convince myself than to reassure her. Mia leans forward, resting her forehead against our clasped hands. I'm here for you, Mom, whatever you need. I draw a deep breath, my mind already turning. My husband's betrayal is a deep cut, but I won't let it be the end of my story. There's a plan forming, a way out of the mess he's made. And in this sterile hospital room, with my stepdaughter by my side, I feel the first stirrings of a future where I am no longer in the shadows of a loveless marriage. I will rise from this, with a cunning that's been honed by years of quiet observation. George may have underestimated me, but he'll soon learn that's his mistake. I look at Mia, her strength becoming my own. Let's start planning, I say, and there's a new determination in my voice. Our bond, unbroken by the lies that surround us, is the foundation we'll build upon. And as Mia smiles, a small, fierce smile, I know we'll win this battle together. The next day, Mia arrives with her laptop tucked under her arm and a look in her eyes that says she means business. She pulls up a chair next to my hospital bed, opens her laptop, and looks straight at me. Okay, Mom, let's talk strategy, she says with a determined nod. I can't help but smile at her spirit. I've been thinking about that, I admit. I want to be fair, but also, I want to protect myself and my future, and yours. Mia nods, her fingers poised over the keyboard. First things first, we should get a lawyer, someone who can help us navigate the divorce smoothly. I agree. Yes, a lawyer, and we'll need to gather all the financial documents. I've got most of them at home in the safe. We can go through them together, Mia offers. What about the house and the rest of the assets? I've been doing some math, I start, feeling the edge of the bed with my fingers. The house. I think I'll let him have it. Mia frowns, surprised. Really? Are you sure? I nod firmly. I want a fresh start, somewhere new, without the memories. Plus, I've got something he doesn't know about. Her eyebrows raise in curiosity. What's that? The investment account, I say. The one my father helped me set up. It's in his name, technically, but it's mine. There's quite a bit of money there, enough for a new place and a comfortable life. Mia's eyes widen. He doesn't know about that? No, and he won't, I state. That money was from before we married. It's separate, and I want to keep it that way. Mia types away, probably making notes. Got it. We keep that account quiet. We should also think about alimony or any spousal support. I shake my head. I don't want his money, but I won't say no if it's offered. It could be useful. Okay, Mia says. And after the legal stuff is sorted? That's when I start my new life, I say, looking out the window. I want to travel, see places I've always dreamed of. When I'm well, of course. Mia reaches out and squeezes my hand. You'll get well, Mom, and I'll be right there with you wherever you go. I squeeze back, feeling a surge of gratitude for this girl. No, this woman, who's been my rock. We're in this together, I tell her, and it's more than just about the plan. It's about us, our journey ahead, and the unspoken understanding that we're a team now. The afternoon sun casts long shadows across my bed as we continue to plot, not just for the end of my marriage, but for the beginning of something new. Just the two of us, ready to face whatever comes next. A few days had passed since Mia and I had put together a plan. Lying on my hospital bed, I felt a mixture of anticipation and anxiety about setting our plan into motion. Mia walked into the room, her face flushed from the cold outside. "All right, it's time," she said, sitting down beside me. "Are you sure you're up for this, Mom?" I nodded, the IV in my arm a stark reminder of my current weakness, but my resolve was strong. "I'm sure, it's now or never." Mia took out her phone, her thumb hovering over the screen. "I'm about to text Dad. I'll tell him that you want to discuss the divorce and that you're willing to talk settlement." "That'll get his attention," I murmured, the bitterness in my voice belying my calm exterior. Mia sent the text, and we waited. It didn't take long for her phone to buzz. She read the message and looked up at me. "He's biting. Wants to come over tomorrow to talk terms." I couldn't help the wry chuckle that escaped my lips. "Talk terms, huh? All right. When he comes, let him believe he's in control. That's the bait." Mia frowned slightly, her concern for me clear. "And you're okay with this? With him coming here and acting like he's won?" I reached for her hand, my grip firmer than it had been in days. "It's just an act, Mia. Remember that. We're letting him think he's won because it's the only way to get what we need from him." Mia squeezed my hand back, her own determination returning to her eyes. "Okay, Mom. I trust you." "And," I added, "make sure he sees the safe when he comes. It's empty, but he doesn't know that. If he thinks there's something valuable in there, it'll keep him focused on the wrong thing." She nodded, making a mental note. "Got it. And after he leaves?" "We proceed with the divorce as planned. But remember, whatever happens, don't let on about the money. That's our ace." Mia stood up, her phone in her pocket. "I won't. We'll get through this, just like you said, together." As she walked out, I lay back against my pillow, closing my eyes. This was just the beginning, but I had to believe that it would lead to an end. Our end, one where Mia and I could move forward, free from the shadows of deceit that had loomed over us for far too long. The morning light crept through the blinds, casting lines across the hospital room floor. I had barely slept, thoughts whirling about the upcoming confrontation. I tried to steady my breathing, the rhythmic beeping of the monitor beside my bed, a constant reminder of my situation. There was a knock on the door, and Mia peeked in, her face serious. "He's here, Mom." I nodded, sitting up a little straighter. "Let him in." Mia opened the door, and in walked George, my soon-to-be ex-husband. He had a smirk on his face that made my stomach turn, but I kept my expression neutral. "Hello, George," I said, my voice steady. "Didn't expect to see you looking so alive," he sneered, taking a seat without being offered one. "So, what's this about a settlement?" I took a deep breath. "I want to keep things simple. No dragging this out. You can have the house." His smirk widened. "That's generous of you. What's the catch?" "No catch," I replied, meeting his gaze. "I just want to end this cleanly. I'm tired, George. I don't have the energy for a fight." Mia watched, her face a mask of control. George's eyes flicked to her and then to the safe in the corner of the room. "I suppose you'll be wanting support then?" he asked, a greedy glint in his eyes. I shook my head slightly. "No, I don't want your money. I'll manage on my own." He leaned back, looking suspicious. "What's your game here? You're giving up everything. What are you hiding?" "Nothing to hide," I said, allowing a hint of fatigue to seep into my voice. "I just want peace, George, and I think you do too." He snorted. "Yeah, peace, with a young, beautiful woman waiting for me." Mia's hand clenched into a fist, but she didn't speak. "I hope she makes you happy," I said quietly. George stood up, looking around the room once more. "Fine. I'll have my lawyer call yours. We'll get this over with." As he reached the door, he paused and looked back at me. "You're a fool, you know that? Letting go of everything without a fight." I met his gaze, my own eyes clear. "Maybe, but sometimes, letting go is the only way to move forward." George shook his head and left, the door closing with a soft click behind him. Mia rushed to my side. "Are you okay, Mom?" I nodded, feeling a weight lifting off my shoulders. "I'm fine, it's done. Now we just have to follow through." Mia hugged me, her presence a comfort. "You're the bravest person I know." I hugged her back, allowing myself this moment of warmth. Brave? Maybe. But I'm not in this alone, am I? "No, Mom," Mia whispered. "Not alone, never alone." The ink on the divorce papers wasn't even dry when Mia dropped the bomb about the money. She was hesitant at first, biting her lip in that way she does when she's nervous. But I urged her on, knowing that whatever came next was just another scene in this absurd play my life had become. "Dad knows about the $3 million, Mom," Mia said, her voice barely above a whisper. I sighed, not surprised. I expected as much. What's his play? It didn't take long for him to make his move. The next day, he was at my hospital room door, his eyes wide with a mix of greed and desperation. He knelt by my bed, taking my hand in his. "I've been a fool," he started, his voice trembling with feigned emotion. "Please, let's put all this behind us and start over." I looked at him, really looked at him, and I felt nothing. It was liberating. I couldn't help but laugh, a genuine, deep laugh that I hadn't felt in years. "Start over?" I said, pulling my hand away. "There's nothing to start, George. It's done." His face turned an ugly shade of red, the mask slipping. "You think you can mock me?" he hissed. "I'll take you to court. I'll take every penny of that money." "That money," I said calmly, almost enjoying this, "is safely out of your reach. It's in my father's name. There's not a thing you can do about it." His eyes bulged and he spluttered, his anger a living thing between us. But before he could form words, security was at the door, alerted by the commotion. They didn't even need to speak. Their presence was enough. George's outburst was his final act, his curtain call. As they escorted him out, his shouts echoed down the hall, a pitiful sound that faded with each step. I leaned back against my pillows, a sense of peace settling over me. Mia, who had stood by the door, her face a mix of worry and anger, finally let out a long breath. "Are you okay, Mom?" I reached for her hand, a smile playing on my lips. "I am now, sweetheart. It's truly over." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the past lifting, leaving room for something new, something better. And as the door closed on the last vestige of my old life, I felt ready to face a new day. It was a clean slate, a true new beginning, and I was ready to write my own story. Life after cancer, and George felt like stepping out of a long, dark tunnel into sunlight. I bought a house with a big garden, somewhere Mia could visit whenever she wanted, a place that felt like ours, truly ours. One afternoon, Mia and I were sitting on the porch, sipping lemonade and watching the sun dip below the trees. She had been helping me unpack boxes, turning the house into a home. Her laughter was a frequent sound here, echoing off the walls, filling spaces that had known too much silence. "You know, Mom," Mia said, her eyes scanning the yard, "I've never seen you this relaxed." I smiled, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face. "I have a lot to be thankful for. I beat cancer, I'm free of George, and I have you." She squeezed my hand. "I'm just glad you're finally putting yourself first. You always took care of me, even when I wasn't your responsibility." I shook my head. "You were always my responsibility, Mia. The moment I decided to be your mom, that was it. You were my family." Mia's eyes misted over, and she gave me a teary smile. "I'm glad he's out of our lives. I've never liked how he treated you, and now we don't have to deal with his drama anymore." The sun had almost set, and the sky was a canvas of purples and oranges. I stood up, feeling more alive than I had in years. "Let's go inside. I'll make us dinner, our favorite spaghetti and meatballs." She hopped up, following me into the kitchen. "Can I help?" she asked, rolling up her sleeves. "Of course. You can start by rolling the meatballs." We moved around the kitchen together, a dance we had perfected over years of cooking side by side. As I watched her hands, so much like mine, shaping the meatballs, a sense of contentment washed over me. This is what real family feels like, I thought. There were no harsh words here, no expectations or disappointments. Just me and Mia, and a future we could shape into whatever we wanted. Our laughter and the aromatic sense of our shared cooking efforts filled the kitchen, and I knew, deep down, that this was what happiness felt like. After years of just going through the motions, I was finally living. And I had the real family, my daughter, to thank for it.